my name is Kamecia Louise. I am a biomedical engineer at the VA Medical Center in West Palm Beach, Florida.
For those of us that have no idea, what is a biomedical engineer?
So biomedical engineering is a multidisciplinary field. It covers medical equipment manufacturing.
One more question. What's multidisciplinary?
It just means that it covers a lot of different fields, right? So a lot of fields come together to create things. So for instance, tissue engineering is a part of biomedical engineering that is more lab focused, where you take animal or human tissue and you try to, a lot of the research that I did was make it stronger, basically, in various ways. Won't go into details because biology is kind of gross when you get deep into it. But some of you might like that. I am a biomedical engineer in the hospital. My subspecialty, which is if biomedical engineering is the umbrella, then subspecialty just kind of falls under it. I'm a clinical engineer, so that means that basically I manage all of the medical equipment in the hospital. Right now, I am the chief biomedical engineer here, so that means that I manage a lot of people in addition to managing the equipment. So if you ever have to go to a hospital and you may see that a family member may be hooked up to an infusion pump or a monitor, something that tells you their heart rate or their CO2 production. I manage that equipment. My department's job is to make sure that equipment works properly. And we manage everything from if your parents go to the hospital and they have to do a stress test on a treadmill, because when older people run, it makes them stressed. All the way up to a big MRI or a CT scanner. We manage all of those here. And we also advise doctors which ones are the best ones to purchase. You're on mute.
Reminder that you all can put your questions in chat and ask your questions. I'll ask questions until y'all start asking questions, remember, but I'd rather ask your questions. So how long did you have to go to school to become a biomedical engineer?
I got my bachelor's in 4 years, and I got my master's in 2 years. So it was a total of 6 years. You don't need a master's to be a biomedical engineer. I have several friends who did not get one, or they started working and then they got a master's. It's definitely not a requirement.
How much do biomedical engineers make if somebody wanted to become?
How much do they make? That's a really good question. It varies. It can start out around 40, 45 and goes all the way up to 6 figures. There's some people out there making 250K, you know. I'm not quite there, but I'm doing pretty good.
250K is a lot of money. Teachers start at like 35 and then go to like 60 for reference. So biomedical engineers would make at 4.5 times what teachers make per hour. So her time is very valuable compared to Molly Hofkamp's time.
I don't think that's true.
So remember, if you have any questions, you can ask them. Have you ever made a mistake as a biomedical engineer?
Of course. Everybody makes mistakes. Sometimes I say the wrong thing and I miscommunicate and I have to go back and clean that up. I work with a lot of doctors and nurses, radiology techs. So sometimes it can almost, I'm pretty sure you all have probably had misunderstandings with your friends or your parents before, and it's almost like you're speaking a different language. Well, it can be like that in a hospital. Engineering is a very technical field. So, but nurses and doctors, they use a lot of complex language as well. So when you try to speak, you want to make sure you're speaking on the same level and that you both understand each other. And I have miscommunicated before because I said something, I thought it was clear and it wasn't. So it's important to be acknowledge who you're talking to, acknowledge your audience, and make sure that everybody understands at the end of the conversation what's happening. Oh, you're on mute again.
The hotkey quit working for me. Have you ever made, like, your mistakes might be pretty big, so has there ever been any big consequences from your mistakes in terms of people getting hurt or sick?
Thankfully, no. We have what are called accreditation agencies. So these are people who basically say, in a very broad sense, these are the safety precautions that you have to take to operate, to ensure medical equipment is safe to use, to ensure that when you install it, it doesn't hurt anyone. So in hospitals, that agency is called the Joint Commission for many hospitals. And essentially, you always want to make sure you go to a hospital that's accredited, for what they're doing there. We have to record a lot of paperwork to ensure that all of our stuff is safe, right? So obviously, I can't ensure everything is safe. That's not possible, but I do it to the best of my ability. We have had issues where things like maybe equipment didn't work properly, and maybe a patient was hurt, and I have to be able to speak to that. I have to say, okay, well, we did all these checks that the manufacturer and the FDA and the Joint Commission said that we had to do. And to the best of our knowledge, the equipment was safe. Unfortunately, you can't 100% ensure that equipment is safe all the time. Things happen, right? You guys are on iPads right now. So I'm sure sometimes your iPad does something, you're like, why did it do that? And you either close the app or you restart the iPad and it works properly again. Well, the same thing happens with medical equipment. Even though we rely on it, even though that iPad might work properly 99.5% of the time, it's that 0.5% of the time that we try to get as low as possible. So if we can make that 0.5 turn into a 0.1, then that's our job to try to do that.
We've got a bunch of questions coming in, which is great. Someone wants to know, what school did you go to become what you are? So what school did you go to?
So I went to Mississippi State University for undergrad, Hill State, and I went to the University of Rochester in Western New York for my master's. There are a ton of schools that offer biomedical engineering. I think St. Louis University, you guys are in St. Louis, so I think St. Louis University offers it. There are just so many really good schools that offer biomedical engineering. You can go most of the time, you can go to school within an hour or two of your house, or like I did for undergrad, or you can go off really, really far and explore like I did for grad school.
And what do you love about your job is another question in our chat.
I like that I don't do the same thing every day. Some days, yes, I do paperwork some days. Like today, I have to do paperwork to purchase some equipment. We're purchasing some ultrasounds and x-rays and an angio suite, which is like a fancy type of x-ray essentially. And sometimes that's necessary, but other times I go into construction sites. You see my hard hat back there. I wear steel-toe boots. Other times I just walk around the hospital all day, interacting with people. I also, not so much now because my life is calm, especially because of the pandemic. I don't travel as much, but I used to travel like probably every month for a week or two, for several years. So I really like that I got to travel a lot, and I work for the government technically, so the government was really invested in me learning more about my field, getting some exposure, making those connections in my field. So those are the things that I really like about it.
What were some classes you had to take to become a biomedical engineer?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I had to take algebra, um, and I basically had to take very advanced math classes. So I took 4 calculus classes. Once you get to college, you may hear about a class called differential equations. It's like it's higher level than calculus. I had to take that. I had to take a lot of physics courses and derivatives of physics, things like fluid mechanics. I also took a lot of biomedical engineering specific courses. So before I mentioned tissue engineering, so I had to take a tissue engineering course. I took some medical imaging courses that talk about the science behind MRIs and X-rays. When I was in high school, I mentioned to Mr. Hofkamp that I was in a pre-engineering academy in high school. So in high school, I did things like I took a digital electronics class. So basically, I learned all about circuit boards, and I learned how to put them together and make them do various things. I learned how to make a stoplight work, and so those were very hands-on, very cool things that I got to learn to do.
Why? What made you choose your job? Why did you choose to become a biomedical engineer?
I wanted to help people, and there are a lot of different ways to do that. I was very good at math and science, and I also had an interest in the medical field, but I didn't want to be a doctor because I didn't really want to treat patients. Um, so I tried to find somewhere where all those things intersected, and biomedical engineering was it. I liked the aspects of engineering where you're trying to create something, and I liked learning how things worked, but I also liked the people aspect where I get to meet a lot of people. Like I said, I work in a hospital, so I don't work in a lab or a factory, which are also things that biomedical engineers do, but that tends to also, if you're an electrical engineer or a mechanical engineer, you tend to work in a factory more so than in a hospital environment like I do.
I'll ask a couple more questions while we're waiting for some more questions to show up in chat. Remember that you can ask any question you want. So what advice would you have for our future scientists on the call?
I would say no man is an island. No one can do it on their own. So I would say get you a very good support system to help you through those tough times. Everyone needs that. My best friends are also engineers. So when we were in college, we studied together, we tutored each other because I didn't understand everything, but I knew someone who could help me. So I would also say, don't be afraid to ask for help. There's always someone out there willing to help you because I'm sure Mr. Hofkamp will agree. He wants you to succeed. the people who love you and who surround you, they want you to succeed. So don't be scared to ask for help.
And how has being a Black woman affected you during your career in STEM?
That's a tough one. In different ways, I do go into a lot of spaces where I may not just be the only Black woman in the space. I may be the only Black person. I may be the only woman. So that can be tough when you are surrounded maybe by older people who have different values. So I'm 30, right? So I came up in an era when it was very common to tell girls that they can, try out all these different things. Well, everyone didn't grow up in that situation, especially if they're older. They may have a hard time believing that I have the credentials that I do. So sometimes I have to prove myself. Sometimes if they make a joke, I have to make a better joke. And so that can sometimes be tough. But I will say there are a lot of resources out there. Whichever college you go to probably have what's called a bridge program. So the bridge program is for minority students interested in STEM, so that they put you in study groups. They help you acclimate to college. They get you a mentor who can help you along and give you some good school and career advice. A lot of organizations that I'm a part of were specifically geared toward women or Black people. So I joined those organizations, and I took leadership roles in those organizations because I was very passionate about that. And I do think there are some negatives, but there are some positives. There are some spaces that have been created for us so that we can succeed.
And we have another question in the chat. Are you looking to retire soon, or do you want to keep working?
How old do y'all think I am? I'm 30, so no, I am not going to retire soon. You will be my age before I retire. Before I retire. I really like my job, so I don't see myself leaving it anytime soon.
I think that was more of the question, is whether how much you like your job, but they said, are you looking to retire? So that's why we asked it that way. The next question is, what's the worst thing you've ever experienced in your job?
The worst thing that I've ever experienced, I will go back to those misunderstandings. It can be really lonely when you're at the front of the room and people are asking really tough questions, right? And that's a little bit hard for me because growing up, I was a bit of a perfectionist, so I always want to have the answers. I always want to know everything. So as I've gotten older, I've had to learn to say, I don't know, I will do some research on that and get back to you. And that's okay. But those are some really tough situations for me. Luckily, I haven't had any really, really difficult situations where safety was in question or my ability to do my job was in question. That's never been the case, but other people have experienced tough situations like that. It's really, really hard as well.
We don't have any more questions, so maybe I'll ask another one. What did you wish you would have known when you were in the 7th grade?
In the 7th grade, I wish I would have known. I'm trying to remember 7th grade. I guess I wish I would have looked up engineering a little bit sooner. I wish I had considered it a bit sooner. I definitely did work hard in school, but it's kind of like having a job and going to school are two very different things. Even though school is supposed to prepare you for having a job, a lot of times work is just so different. Right? In schools, you always have someone to tell you what to do, right? In work, you don't always have that, especially a lot of times in STEM careers, you have to tell other people what to do. So I guess I would have definitely worked on my problem solving skills a bit more. So I know math helps a lot with problem skills. So I wish I had focused on that a bit more because it kind of gives you it's like practice, right? It's practice for that critical thinking that really allows people to lead well so that they can identify problems and solve them in a abstract way or a different way, I guess.
So maybe something that is kind of important in what you're saying is that the math that they're learning now and the science that they're learning now is the foundation for going on.
Definitely, like things like learning, like I said, math is problem solving, but things like the scientific method definitely help you think a bit differently. And helps you to not think, oh, I'm right, so I'm going to find proof to support that I'm right. The scientific method is sometimes you have an assumption and sometimes you're wrong, and that's okay. Because at the end of it, you're better off for it, right? So you're still able to find that answer, and it may not be the answer you thought you were going to find, but it's an answer nonetheless, and it's a success nonetheless.
For science class, they have an ongoing extra credit project that they can design an experiment at home. If you were designing an experiment at home, what experiment would you design and why?
If I was doing an experiment at home, that is another tough question. I know a fun one would be Pop Rocks, or not Pop Rocks and Coke, but the fizzy volcanoes. Those are always really fun. I
So
feel like, what are you working on?
What we're working on is making sure that they have an independent and a dependent variable. So if you were doing the volcano, what would your independent variable be?
Oh man, I don't.
Asking you the hard questions.
Oh no, I don't know anymore.
Like what you're changing, what would you change in the experiment?
So you would change the reagent that you pour into the volcano, right?
Right.
So that would be your independent variable, and your dependent variable would be the liquid that is actually within it.
The
Did I get
dependent
that right?
variable would be how big the explosion would be.
Okay.
I'll edit this out. Don't worry about it. That's funny. It's interesting because like the language you would know these steps in the scientific method, but the language is different when you get further into your career, because
No. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Because you would do some experiments with your job, or no?
I don't do experience with my job. My job is normally just like hard facts. So a lot of troubleshooting. So how do I explain my job? So my job is like where IT and medicine and a little bit of logistics, where all of these things meet. So I don't do too many experiments here. A lot of it is troubleshooting. So if something breaks, we have to test X, Y, Z. If we test all of these things and we still can't identify why it's not working, then we have to reach out to a coworker to figure out if they might know what's going on. We can reach out to there are 150 VAs in the government, so we can reach out to people at every VA to see if they have experience with that. We can also reach out to the manufacturer. So I guess that's a little bit of maybe not research in a traditional sense, but it's definitely a lot of troubleshooting.
It sounds more like the engineering design process compared to the scientific method.
Exactly.
So we haven't really gotten into the engineering design process yet, but we will. I promise that. I've got another question. Have any of your parents or family members been engineers before you?
No, actually, I'm the first one. My mom, growing up, my mom worked a lot of different customer service. She was a secretary. She worked at a call center. She had a lot of different jobs. And when I was a teenager, she went to school for accounting. So that's what she does right now. She works in wealth management at Regions. I don't know if there's a Regions Bank in St. Louis, but she works there. And my dad went to school for business, and he worked for MCI, which was a phone company that probably went out of business before most of you were born. And now he also works for the government as a federal agent.
Another question we have in the chat is, do you work by yourself mostly, or do you work with somebody?
I work with a lot of people. There are 10 people on my team. I also, like I said, I work with doctors and nurses, technologists for various different areas, pulmonary, radiology, what have you. I work with other engineers as well for like projects, so the installation of the equipment that we use. Sometimes we also have to work with, say, the AC shop for things like temperature monitoring. When you go in the hospital, it's super cold. Things have to stay at a certain temperature in various areas, particularly areas where we use disposables, like not necessarily gauze, but just different disposable, things in the hospital, as well as medications have to be kept at a certain temperature. So we might have to work with an AC mechanic for that, or we might have to work with an electrician for other things, or a plumber, or an electronics tech. So we do work with a lot of different people.
So somebody wants to know if you have any siblings, and if so, how many?
Yes, I have two. My brother, who was in the Air Force, and my sister, who currently works in HR.
Awesome. I had a question, but I'm forgetting it now. If you have a question, type it into the chat. Oh, how expensive is some of the equipment that you work on? Like,
I just put a request in for a $2.5 million piece of equipment. So it goes into multi-million-dollar pieces of equipment, all the way down to $1,000 or a few $1,000s.
What did you buy that was $2.2 million?
It's a angio suite. So it's so if sometimes adults need X-ray procedures where the physician will the physician will actually use a guided needle to go into really deep parts of your body. So they use an X-ray to guide that, and that's what the angio suite is for. There's also very similar piece of equipment called a cath lab, and they use X-ray to actually go into your heart. To remove all types of yucky things that may be causing blockages, that may be causing you heart problems, or you may have some issue with a heart valve. It's a routine treatment for, I'll say people who are around like middle age.
How much you make a year?
I answered that before. The biomedical engineers can make anywhere from 40K all the way up to 250. So. Oh, you're on mute.
We only have 4 minutes left in our interview today. So I was wondering if you have anything you want to add to, like anything you want to add.
No, I don't have a lot. You guys have been really great. I really enjoyed answering your questions, and if you're interested in this field, it's a growing field. It literally didn't exist 40 years ago. It wasn't a thing. So it's a really cool growing field. There are more opportunities that people are still fleshing out. There's a lot of IT opportunity here if you like computers, but you're also kind of flexible. Then this is a good field to go into. You get to meet a lot of people, and it's really fun. Actually, I like it a lot.
I'm thankful that we got to talk because I learned a little bit more about what it means to be a biomedical engineer, because I don't think I really knew or understood what a biomedical engineer was. So I'm really thankful for that. Here we say like asante, which is Swahili for thank you, or asante sana, which is thank you very much. So thank you so much for talking to us today.